I want to say this. I want to thank all of the members of the church, far and wide. For the past 14 years, I've had an assignment, an Isaiah assignment. The Bible says that Isaiah, in the book of Isaiah, the prophecy, that he went into the temple one day and there was nobody in there, but he looked and there was the Lord in the temple. And sitting on his throne, high and lifted up. Seraphims there with their wingspans. And God said that he needed somebody to go and speak to the corruptness of the people, of the nations. And Isaiah looked around, there was nobody there but him. He said, well, Lord, I would go, but I'm just as corrupt as everybody else. Though I'm a priest and a prophet according to the traditions of the priest, I've been qualified and I've been credentialed as a priest. They know that I am, but I'm just as corrupt as they are. He said, I got a dirty mouth. And the Bible says that one of the angels took a coal off the altar and flew and touched his lips and purged his lips with fire. And then his lips were clean. And then Isaiah said, Lord, I'll go for you. And from there on, Isaiah was no longer a prophet that ran with all the various denominations and all the various, if you will, conventions and all of the various meetings in high society and where all the preachers hung out, all the priests of Anatoth and all of their powers. And he no longer hung with any of them anymore. He preached against them. He no longer went into the temple to worship. He stood outside of it and preached against it. And that's what God called him to do. And he ended his ministry, his prophecy, preaching on that wise, calling out the corruption of the priesthood, of the temple, of the rabbis, of the people in general. And God called me 14 years ago or thereabouts, and I began to preach. Let me rephrase that. I was already well into preaching more than 20 years. Had already received the vision of ATLAH. And then corruption descended on America in the presence of Barack Hussein Obama. And God called me. And I said, I'll go. And I struck out on a mission, kind of like the song, I'm on the battlefield for the Lord. I had been doing a lot of various teaching, biblical teachings, and teaching the book of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and I've been doing several kinds of teaching, such as what we're doing at present. But I struck out to confront the amount of evil that had descended and destroyed the lives. There are people's lives right now that are destroyed and will not be repaired because of that man. But they don't know it, of course. They don't know it. Even with all the preaching that I did, they don't know it, which is par for the course for preachers. With Isaiah, when he preached, they didn't know it. But I said, I'll go. And I gave up my position as a person among pastors and pastors in this city and in this nation. I gave it up. I gave up the allurement. I gave up the monies that were associated with my titles and my abilities. I gave it up. I gave up the prestige, if you will. I gave up family. I gave up friends, as they could have been called that. I gave it all up. And I began to preach. Like a voice crying out in the wilderness of North America, I began to preach. I cried aloud and I spared nobody. I just preached. And things happened. The ministry appeared to have gone differently. People left. I was accused. All kinds of things happened. And at the end of the 8 years, we thought there was going to be some relief. It got worse. Donald Trump came. And I went to his aid thinking that he finally, the things I'm saying and been saying all these years, were now going to be brought to light. That birth certificate, that Kenyan birth is going to be explored by the powers of the Pentagon, the CIA, because the president had to go and get it. He didn't do it. It got worse. And I went off again. So for the past 12, 13 years, I've been on a mission for God. I want to thank all of y'all that decided to stay with me. I want to thank you. Because you didn't have to. As you know, a large number of people didn't. They just booked. They left. They didn't understand it. And even now, people don't really fully and completely understand when God sends you on a mission and tells you what you must do. And you understand it, you see it clearly. You see it clearly as anything that can be seen clearly, as painful as anything can be seen painful. And there's no way you can say like Jeremiah after a period of time, I'm not preaching this anymore. People hate me for what I preach. Nobody likes me. Everybody works for my destruction. I'm not preaching anymore, Jeremiah said. I'm not doing it. And Lord, you knew that these people were not going to receive me. I'm not preaching anymore, Jeremiah said. I ain't doing it. And the worst of it came the LGBTQ crowd. Preaching against them. And Obama planning it as a part of the church. It's just as much now part, LGBTQ is just as now part of the church as playing the organ and the piano and the choir. It's just church, LGBTQ. And they all, Jeremiah said, I ain't doing it no more. I ain't doing it. I ain't doing it. It's not getting me anywhere. Nobody's listening. I'm not doing it, he said. I ain't doing it no more. And he quit. And there's that famous segment where he said, I thought I could quit. But the word of corruption was like fire, 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 shut up in my bones. And I had to preach. I can do no other. Kind of reminds me, I think Martin Luther, the great reformer in the Catholic Church, who had been called to the diet at Worms, to the conference at a city in Germany called Worms, and at the council called Worms. And they said to Martin Luther, the Catholic bishops, and on orders of the Pope, if you'll recant what you're saying about the church, about the Pope, if you'll recant what you're saying about using the power of the Pope to buy souls out, if you'll recant and unite the church again, we'll forgive you. At that council, they brought Martin Luther in. And Martin Luther said something on the order, and I won't, not quoting him exactly rather. But he says, I've said what I've said, and here I stand, and God help me. I can do no other. I can't say something. I can't go along with what y'all are doing in the church. I can't. You're wrong. The Pope is wrong. All of y'all, the churches are teaching the people are wrong. God knows it's wrong. Here I stand, and I can do no other. I cannot do but what I'm doing. Do to me what you will, but I must serve God. I must preach. And I went through 14 years of that, pure hell, over the past 14 years. Yeah, you know, you probably never thought about what it's like to be hated by everybody in Africa. And people see you walk by, now they're afraid to tell you to your face that they hate you, but boiling inside of their spirit, they love Obama, they love him, they love it. But they hate white folk, they hate, and somehow or another their minds about slavery and about what's happening, and many of them don't know not a damn thing about a hard day's work in their life, though they've had jobs and collected paychecks for weeks, have never done a hard day's work in their life, talking about slavery and the white man. And they look at me. And they think I'm some kind of freak. Though they won't say it to my face, but you can feel it when you walk by. And what you gonna do? They ain't nowhere to run. Can't leave that one because the next one you go to feels the same way. 14 years I preached. I'm not saying that it's over. I didn't say that. But thank God for this celebration today. And thank God for the place that we are now looking at Egypt. I've accepted that slavery was biblically ordained of God. I've accepted that God has called me to preach against corruption. I've accepted it. I've accepted it. And here I stand, God help me, I can do it. I'm not going back. I will never return to that vomit. I'll never be a black man. That's what you expect me to be. I'll never be an African American. I never return to that vomit. God help the LGBTQ freaks. God help you. God help you. I would never. What I know about them, they're some of the meanest snakes in the jungle. You ain't seen a snake like a LB. You ain't. Let them turn on you. A fellow wrote to me, he was a doctor up in Boston Hospital. He said, Pastor Manning, I hear you down there. He said, I treat them when they come in. The way they treat each other is brutal. He said, you're right. keep preaching. And I am. Over the years, we have served more than 1 million meals to hungry bellies and hungry people here in the Harlem community. And I wanted you to be able to see that. I want you to see our involvement with youth, our summer youth programs, our courtyard being used as a place where children can be safe, guarded, and protected as they have their miniature swimming pools, and a safe place for children to eat that is guarded, that is protected by our own sense of security, and the wholesome and fresh meals that we serve. We wanted you to be able to see the mission of this church. And we've been doing this for years. Just recently, one of our members, more than a 30-year member of this church, but it hasn't, not one that, that you would probably find as members of some other churches with their nose stuck up in the air. But her father is now close to death or very sick in the state of South Carolina. And I said to her, because she doesn't have money, I said, we will buy you a bus ticket, a round trip bus or train ticket for you to travel to South Carolina to be with your father in this time of pandemic. There's very little funding around. There's sickness everywhere. And the thing that just blew me away was she said, as she was talking to Elizabeth, she said, but how are you going to do that, to pay for me a round trip ticket to travel and give me expense money? And because Pastor Manning has to feed the children, he has to educate the children, he has to buy school supplies for them, he has to pick them up in the mornings and take them back, and then he's got the ministry he has to take care of, all the bills of running the church, of keeping a major house like our house operational, keep the lights on, how are you going to be able to do that? And she was almost reluctant to take the money because she felt that it would be better served by feeding the children. We gave it to her anyway. But we want you to know that we do a work in this community. There have been a lot of lies told on us. And it's almost unimaginable why some of the people that have lied on us. But I can tell you behind all of it is the LGBTQ community. They don't want us to be successful, but we are, and we're going to continue to be successful in serving the meals that we're serving and serving the people that we are. And the LGBTQ community will not take us down. They are not going to take our church. Yet they've defamed us. They've written ugly newspaper articles about us. They've marched against us. They've done a whole lot of ugly things. But you see what we have done, and that's not even the half of our service to children and to the needy in terms of our homeless shelters and the things that we've done over the years. And we will continue. And probably the lies and the smears and the ugly newspaper articles and the wicked spirits and the so-called I ain't for the black man, that is not going to go away. I don't expect it to go away. I don't. But I do tell you this, that we will succeed against all of that, for God is with us, and I am his servant.